The traveler transformed Mercury into a garden world. It was a paradise, until the Becks came.
Vanilla Destiny 2 is a solid game. It's a game that, whilst removing a lot of functions from its predecessor, provides an enjoyable playground of beautifully crafted presentation and some of the finest core shooting gameplay you're likely to find. However, it does fall short in some important areas that hamper the long-term enjoyment of the game, and Bungie have been, for lack of a better word, under attack from a discontented fanbase because of it. The game's first DLC expansion, Curse of Osiris, has unfortunately come at an awkward time, where it was neither in a position to, or developed for the purpose of, calming any of that unrest.
There's been a development on Mercury. Strange reports from the cultists clinging to what's left of the planet. Normally, I'd ignore their conspiracy theories. But one of my hidden brought me this.
It's difficult to know where to start with Curse of Osiris. It's an expansion with a million ideas that feels like it was pushed into the wilderness before any of them were fully realised. The narrative holds as a prime example, the story of Osiris, a fabled warlock from the first game who mysteriously vanished into what we now know as the Infinite Forest, a vexed computer simulation of infinite timelines, with the goal of measuring different permutations of the future, present and the past. It's a mind-boggling concept that opens up a world of possibilities, but is ultimately reduced to a vague and underwhelmingly short drive-by of a character we'd all truly love to know more about.
Ominous rocks, killer robots, people in mortal danger. Seriously, aren't you tired of this?
Fatigue is a distraction from our purpose, as are complaints.
The Infinite Forest itself, despite being a stunning visual work, is essentially several predefined platforms of enemies leading to an exit, attempting to serve up the illusion of an unsystematic level design. It's a shame the majority of these areas can simply be bypassed altogether by running past the enemies and activating the gates, with only the rare occasions where you'll actually be forced to engage with the content by killing a stronger enemy to unlock them. Then the 8 missions of the campaign eventually arrive at a somewhat scripted boss that, like previous missions, has a bafflingly low difficulty for what is meant to be a continuation of your Guardian's journey. It's easy to understand the reasons behind Curse of Osiris' low level requirement, namely accessibility, but the result is a linear shooting gallery that's neither engaging or challenging in any real way. Initially, the new Mercury patrol area looks fantastic. It allows us to revisit Destiny 1's lighthouse area, albeit transformed into something almost unrecognisable, that overlooks the Infinite Forest Gateway and a circular area around a brand new public event, which is perhaps the best to date. However, once navigated, it quickly becomes apparent how small and hollow this patrol area really is. You'll find patches of enemies with only one lost sector and only 3 adventures to run through. Making matters worse, you'll be ferried away from the area altogether during some missions to replay vanilla content that has been mildly tweaked to pad out the DLC's shortcomings.
Prophecies are coming to pass. I'm finally going to meet Osiris.
Without a doubt though, the biggest frustrations manifest from what could have been. For example, one of the adventures ends in a large circular map, where you're tasked with defending a central area that is so expertly designed it could have been its own tower defense or horde mode, something the community has been asking for since Destiny 1's arrival years ago. Then, the Infinite Forest itself, by mere definition, presents a blank canvas of possibility, only to be compacted into a repetitive corridor that invites you to run through it as fast as possible. Even outside of the DLC, Destiny 2 is full of grand concepts and untold potential in its content, but delivers it half-baked with only the promise of it one day being palatable. With all that said, Curse of Osiris does have its saving graces, namely Osiris' ghost companion Sagira, who guides you through the missions entertainingly, and then there's a pre-Vex inhabited Mercury that will have you wishing it was the DLC's true patrol area, such as its beauty. The endgame also gets a buff with the inclusion of the Lighthouse's weapon forge. The forge requires you to collect materials by grinding through the game's activities, then once collected, you'll receive a new Vex modified weapon. It might not sound that exciting, but reasons to play in Destiny 2's content is much of what is missing right now, and the addition of the incentive is certainly a step in the right direction, as well as an enjoyable inclusion. Once again, Bungie's raids are Destiny's centerpiece. The raid lair, designed to be a shorter, more focused add-on to the main raid, works particularly well. Another shining example of brilliant endgame PvE raid content that strikes a balance between puzzles and boss fights. Whilst you only get to fight a single boss in this lair, the design and mechanics leading through the encounter are challenging and engage team communication well. The decision to introduce these bite-sized raids seem a practical inclusion for future updates, at least until it's time to build a new raid completely in Year 2. It would have been nice to see some shuffling to modes on the player versus player portion of the game, although this DLC may have come too soon for those changes to be implemented. There's 3 new maps, Pacifica, Radiant Cliffs and the PlayStation exclusive Wormhaven, which are all well designed, offering in some cases a more vertical and interesting combat ground than the current maps. Amongst the litany of reused exotics from the first game are some interesting new guns, including a grenade launcher that fires robotic spiders, and a trace rifle that for a brief period was so heavily broken that PvP resembled more of a night out at Quasar laser tag than a shooter-looter. So much so that the gun has been completely nerfed until January, where it will be reworked. Curse of Osiris does well not to be Destiny's worst DLC expansion to date, but it's far from adequate, especially at a time when Bungie could really use a win. The majority of the expansion presents an ambitious and intriguing landscape that never quite hits the mark, with content that settles on mediocrity rather than excellence. There's the return of some enjoyable endgame grinds, and an excellent raid lair, but now the real work begins if the game truly intends to move forward.